She was called the girl in the box. For 7 years, she vanished, not into thin air, but into something worse. Under a stranger's bed, locked in darkness, in a coffin-shaped box where she couldn't sit, stand, or scream. Her name was Colleen Stan, and the world would one day call her survival a miracle. But first came the terror. It was May 19th, 1977, a sunny afternoon in Northern California. Colleen Stan, just 20 years old, was on her way to visit a friend for a birthday party in Westwood. She had no car, no phone, just a bag, a thumb in the wind, and the wide-open road. Hitchhiking back then wasn't rare. It was almost romantic, the spirit of freedom, adventure, youth. And Colleen had done it before. She was cautious. She usually trusted her instincts. That day, she turned down 2 rides before she saw a blue Dodge Colt pull up beside her. Inside was a young couple and a baby in the back seat. They smiled. They looked harmless. Normal. She got in. And that was the last time anyone saw Colleen Stan as a free woman for more than 7 years. The couple's names were Cameron and Janice Hooker. They lived in Red Bluff, California, quiet, blue-collar, unremarkable. But what lived behind their front door was anything but ordinary. Cameron Hooker was a 23-year-old mill worker with disturbing fantasies. He was obsessed with bondage, pain, and control, not in imagination but in practice. Janice Hooker, his wife, was just 19. She was both his accomplice and his victim. She'd agreed to let Cameron act out his dark urges on someone else if he stopped abusing her. So they made a pact. They would find a slave, and that day in May, they found Colleen. Colleen noticed something strange about an hour into the ride. They stopped at a gas station, and Cameron went inside. Janice leaned over and whispered urgently, "Don't try to escape. He'll hurt you." Colleen froze. They drove again, then turned off onto a secluded dirt road into the woods. That's when the horror began. Cameron pulled out a knife, forced Colleen into the back seat, and placed something heavy over her head, a box. A custom-made, soundproof, claustrophobic contraption that locked over her neck. Then came the chains, the gags, the handcuffs. She was no longer a guest. She was a prisoner, and the Hookers took her home. The Hookers lived in a small white house in Red Bluff. It was here, in a cellar, that Colleen was first suspended from the ceiling by her wrists. Naked, blindfolded, alone, Cameron tortured her, beat her, electrocuted her. Then, when she was too weak to fight, he brought out the box. It was roughly the size of a coffin, wooden, lined with insulation, with air holes drilled into the sides. She could not sit up. She could barely move her arms. And that's where she stayed, for 23 hours a day, sometimes more. Over the next few weeks, Colleen's world shrank to total darkness. She was fed once a day. She used a bedpan inside the box. Her body ached constantly. The heat in summer was unbearable. In winter, she froze. But perhaps worse than the physical pain was the psychological torture. Cameron told her about the company, a secret underground organization that supposedly monitored and controlled sex slaves across the country. If she tried to escape, he said, they would find her. Kill her family. Colleen believed him. Because she had nothing else to believe. Janice Hooker's involvement was complicated. She claimed to be another victim. That she had endured years of abuse before Cameron turned his attention to Colleen. But she also helped restrain Colleen. Bathed her. Fed her. She even gave birth to a child during Colleen's captivity, a child who would grow up with a woman locked in a box under the bed. Janice later told police she prayed for forgiveness. That she was afraid of her husband. That she thought Colleen's situation was temporary. But the years went on, and Colleen stayed in the box. By 1978, Colleen had been broken down, physically and emotionally. That's when Cameron made her sign a contract. It was typed, official-looking, full of legal jargon. It named her Kay, and listed her status as slave, owned by Cameron. Colleen signed it. In her mind, it wasn't a fantasy. It was survival. She believed that as long as she obeyed, she'd live. If she disobeyed, if she ran, the company would make her suffer. This was Stockholm Syndrome at its most devastating. The chains were no longer metal. They were psychological. Over time, Colleen was occasionally allowed out of the box. She cooked, cleaned, babysat the Hookers' children. In public, She was introduced as a live-in nanny or even a cousin. People saw her, smiled at her, but they never knew the truth. They didn't know that every night she went back into the box, and every day she wondered if she'd ever be found. In 1981, 4 years into her captivity, Cameron did something unthinkable. He allowed Colleen to visit her family. It was a test, a mind game, proof of control. He even drove her to Riverside, where she saw her parents for the first time since the kidnapping. They were shocked by her thin appearance, her odd behavior, her silence about the past. But when they asked questions, she smiled and said she was doing fine. She told them she joined a religious group, that she was happy. They believed her because they had no reason not to. She stayed the weekend. Then she went back to the box. By 1983, something began to change in Colleen. She was still afraid, but also stronger, more aware. And Janice, too, was reaching a breaking point. She'd watched her husband abuse Colleen for too long. She feared he would take another girl, maybe even their daughter one day. So Janice did the unthinkable. She let Colleen go. On August 9, 1984, Colleen Stan walked away from the Hooker's home for the last time. No police, no sirens, just silence and freedom. But the truth was far from over, because justice still had to be served, and the world had to hear her story. For 7 years, Colleen Stan lived in total submission, kidnapped, chained, locked inside a coffin-sized box beneath her captor's bed. And in 1984, after 2,536 days of abuse, she walked away. But the world had no idea what she had survived. Not yet, because the real story and the pursuit of justice was just beginning. On August 9, 1984, Colleen Stan was released from captivity by Janice Hooker, the wife of her abuser. There were no handcuffs, no police, just a whispered warning from Janice. Don't tell anyone. The company is still watching. But something had changed in Colleen. The fear was still there, but so was a spark, a new awareness that maybe, just maybe, she had been lied to all along. She called her father from a bus station in Riverside. She went home, and within weeks, she learned the truth. There was no company. It had all been a lie, a tool of psychological warfare. Colleen had been controlled, not just by chains and confinement, but by fear itself. Now it was time to fight back. At first, Colleen didn't go to the police. She was traumatized, humiliated. She didn't know who would believe her, but someone else did. Janice Hooker. Racked with guilt and fear, Janice went to her pastor. She confessed everything, the kidnapping, the torture, the years of silence. The pastor urged her to go to the authorities. And in November 1984, Janice walked into the Red Bluff Police Department and dropped a bombshell. She told them who her husband really was, and what he had done to Colleen Stan. Cameron Hooker was arrested on November 16, 1984. When police entered the house, they found the box. It was real, wooden, claustrophobic, exactly as Colleen had described. They found the chains, the gags, the whips, the photographs. They found journals where Cameron wrote in detail about his sadistic fantasies, his plans to kidnap more women, to create a stable of slaves. They also found Colleen's signed slave contract. It was the most chilling evidence of all, not because it proved her consent, but because it proved Cameron's delusion of ownership. He didn't see her as human. He saw her as property. The trial began in 1985 in Red Bluff, California. Cameron Hooker faced 7 felony counts, including kidnapping, sexual assault, and false imprisonment. Because of Colleen's age at the time of the abduction and the length of captivity, the case was unprecedented. The prosecution painted a vivid, terrifying portrait of psychological control and long-term abuse. They called Colleen to the stand. She testified for days. In front of a jury, she relived everything: the ride, the box, the beatings, the years in darkness. Janice Hooker also testified. In exchange for immunity, she agreed to testify truthfully against her husband. Her words stunned the courtroom. Calm, cold, she confirmed every detail and revealed Cameron's plans to abduct even more women. The jury was horrified. After deliberation, they returned with a verdict: guilty. Cameron Hooker was sentenced to 104 years in prison. He was denied parole multiple times, in 2015, again in 2022, after Colleen herself spoke out publicly, urging the parole board not to release him. In 2023, he was granted a medical parole review due to a change in California law. But again, he was denied. As of now, he remains behind bars, where many believe he should stay for life. Colleen Stan didn't just survive, she rebuilt. In the years after her rescue, she changed her name and tried to move on. She married, had a child, worked in social services and domestic violence support, but the scars ran deep. She suffered from PTSD, nightmares, anxiety. Still, she chose to speak out. She gave interviews, appeared on talk shows, participated in documentaries. Her story, as horrifying as it was, became a warning. A message about manipulation, abuse, and survival. Colleen Stan is not a victim anymore. She's a survivor. The Colleen Stan case became a textbook example of coercive control. Experts have studied it for decades, trying to understand how a woman could be so thoroughly manipulated that she didn't run, even when the door was open. The answer lies in trauma. Cameron Hooker didn't just chain her body. He broke her will. He created a reality so warped, she believed obedience was the only path to survival. It's called learned helplessness. It's real. It's powerful. And it explains why Colleen Stan didn't escape sooner. Because she didn't know she could. Janice Hooker's immunity deal sparked controversy. Was she a co-conspirator? Or a victim herself? She admitted to helping Cameron abduct Colleen. She watched her suffer, helped restrain her, hid the truth for 7 years. But she also ended it. She confessed, freed Colleen. The justice system called it cooperation. Some call it betrayal. To this day, Janice lives under a different name. Quiet, hidden. But her role in the crime will always cast a shadow. The girl in the box case changed how America viewed captivity and survival. It reminded us that chains aren't always visible. That control can be mental. That monsters can hide in plain sight, behind white picket fences, smiling wives, and babies in the back seat. It also proved the resilience of the human spirit. Colleen endured what few can imagine and lived to tell the tale. Her strength became her justice, and her story is now a symbol of survival, recovery, and the power of truth. Colleen Stan once said, "I had to shut myself off from my mind and become like a robot. But that robot learned to feel again, to love, to hope, to live." And today, when we hear about the girl in the box, we should remember more than just the horror. We should remember the woman who survived it. Colleen Stan,